Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one person or one starfish at a time. Guys, as always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out about what we do. I'm excited for our guest. We just met. Now Joseph is runs an AI company. He can explain that a little bit more. AI is a little bit complicated for me sometimes. I'm just trying to get into that. Also an author, was a consultant doing some cool stuff back in the day before he started his own company. Now he's doing cool stuff in his company. And his books look incredible. So welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get into things. So, you know, were you always raised, you live in California right now.
Yes.
Were you raised in California? And what got you got into consulting? Tell us a little bit about like your journey from like childhood to what you decided I want to be in life, I guess.
Yeah. So I was originally born in Tanzania, which is a country in East Africa.
Mhm.
And as a kid, like that's like my deep drive. As a kid, my dad started the first electrical engineering consulting company in the country. So that was how I got this in my subconscious mind to like start my own company. And growing up, we had a lot of access to books and like history across different countries, and I got to learn about like all sorts of people and how like how about see over how we moved from US to UK to China to Australia, and it made his wealth through mining and so forth. So that kind of all sorts of those stories kind of like built in me this hunger and thirst of wanting to run my own business and create like a bigger impact across different countries in the world. But over time in Tanzania, as I grew up, went through a lot of ups and downs, right? So over time, as I got to age 10, my dad's business went bankrupt. So we found ourselves in a very difficult financial position. Ended up, losing all our houses, the cars, everything, being relegated to a small village and starting life from scratch. And my parents separated, so we had to come up with my mom. And I'm very thankful that during those times, my mom didn't treat us as kids, like grown up with kids. She, took us as a unit, as a team, and shared exactly how all of that, came to happen and what we can do. So, what's your vision? What do you guys want to do? How do you see yourselves in the future? And these are the possible paths we can take, and these are the risks which each one of these paths. So, and then we picked. So we just picked to start growing ourselves out of that out of that hole. It took a long time. But I was lucky because my mom taught us to dream and daydream, build our vision all the way to the intricate details of like what house do you want to live in, what kind of curtains does it have, what kind of flooring does it have. I built in my mind when I was in a village when I was 10, built in my mind a vision of what kind of school I was in. And that was like a school in the US with all this setup. And that happened like 10 years later, like 7 years later, I was already there. So I was lucky to go through an exchange program run by the State Department. Found myself in Iowa, in Monroe, Iowa. Very nice place, very nice people. So that was a great experience that I had. And that kind of experience exposed me to my extended talents and abilities that I hadn't discovered, growing up. And from there, I joined after high school. I didn't have the access to, student debt, which I didn't want to take, but also access to like, funds to be able to pay for college. Got a lot of scholarships, but you have to finish up. So went back to Tanzania, and I found myself in this loop, which most young people find themselves, which is you finish school, you can't get a job because you don't have experience. And you can't get experience because no one is going to give you this chance. So how do you break the loop? Luckily, when I was in Iowa, we went with the First Reformed Church, went for a mission trip in New Orleans to build houses, for people who were devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And that gave me a lot of like, community development experience. And, how do you actually make yourself useful even if you don't have, let's say, quote unquote, marketable skills and no one is willing to like hire you. And so, because we have a body, if you're healthy, you have a body, you can wake up in the morning, you have energy that you can translate into something useful for someone else. So that's the lesson I took from there. So when I was in Tanzania, and I'm in this loop, can't get hired, I was like, well, I can actually volunteer, right? That's one thing I can do. So I started, setting up, going house by house, mobilizing young people who finished college and didn't have jobs. And saying, look, we have land. Most of the land isn't put to use. Let's convince the parents, the older people in the community who own the land, to give us land for free, to rent us land for free, and we can mobilize to get some cash from offices, and so to get some water pumps, and then start agricultural initiatives. It didn't work when I was running it on my own because people are like, "Who are you? You're 19 years old. Go back to school." But so I decided, well, I need a bigger brand. I need to be behind a brand, like under a brand which people trust, so I can get this done. So I just, joined the Youth of the United Nations Association, which is like a UN, like youth group, like youth umbrella under the UN, which does a lot of volunteering activities. It's mostly self initiatives that you have to like start yourself, with zero budget, raise money, for yourself and, young people that you mobilize with and get things done. Very successful. We ended up, doing a lot of successful things. I did that for 2 years. And across that time, I started getting opportunities to train other young people in other countries, how to build zero budget community development programs as a way to unstuck themselves from this loop of you have a college degree, you can't get a job, and you want to get some momentum, right? And so I found myself in Indonesia and some other countries doing that training. And along the way, the US State Department offered me a scholarship to go to Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, for a summer programs, international business program. I wasn't qualified for it, right? So I was younger. I didn't have a bachelor's, and the program is for people who have worked and they're in the mid-career stage. But because I had done like a lot of things with the little I had, they found me like to be a fit. So I ended up joining them. That was my first exposure in the world of business. So I got to understand that, look, it's good to do like community development programs based on grants, but it's very difficult to sustain them. And it's very difficult for these people that you're helping to build, sustainable loops for their businesses. What I found when I got at Lehigh, was an exposure in the world of consulting. And my understanding there was, well, these big companies that are operating across multiple markets, if we help them understand and invest in different communities and in different, consumer groups and so on, the expansion comes with expanding their service providers, their vendors who are small businesses, and therefore all these small businesses will get revenue from it, hire more people, and then build a more sustainable economic loop, right? So I went into consulting afterwards, started consulting for multinational companies based in the US, in Europe, traveling over the world, helping them. The problem I was solving that I was very good at was, these companies are multinationals, they have international markets, and the challenge was of the international markets that we have, which market should we invest more dollars in? With what product and service that we already have in our portfolio, targeting what consumer base, at what price point, through which sales channels to generate the highest ROI. So I did that for 8 years. Now, as I was doing that, the surprise became, well, how is it possible that, these multi-billion dollar companies are finding it extremely difficult to actually have data and correct decision systems when choosing the right moves? So it was very difficult because none of these companies had built or, even have, even today, very like future-proof, airtight decision systems that can almost tell them based on their, desired results, tell them what moves to make at each point. So what moves to make on which consumer segment to sell to, what kind of ad campaigns to run to that consumer segment, what kind of product packaging to push to that consumer segment, and so on. So 8 years of doing that and proving that there was demand for that across multiple verticals, we ended up starting Rwazi with my co-founder Eric in 2021 as a decision AI platform to help enterprise teams drive growth. So the problems we solve for the companies are threefold. So one, we help companies capture, retain, and grow market share. The second one, we help companies increase their marketing ROI, which in other words is decreasing the cost of acquiring consumers. And the third one, we help companies drive consumer lifetime value. So we've grown in the last 4 years, we've grown now to like $20 million of annual recurring revenue. We have 44 employees and coverage across 190 countries. But the journey to me has taught me a lot of lessons that I put in the book, Never Stay Broke. That I'm looking at the person who isn't, people in different ranges of being stuck, all the way from people who, finish school, can't get a job because you don't have experience, that kind of loop, and all the way to people who are working, they have a salary, life is, seemingly from the outside, looking stable, but they don't have, savings. They're looking at retirement, the future looks, bleak. They're looking at all the mountain of expenses and increasing costs, and they're looking, they're feeling that they're in this stuck loop that they're not getting any results from all the hard work and energy they're spending every day.
Wow, that was a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if your listeners caught everything. The part I just want to go back to that I just think was so good. His mom basically taught him how to visualize
Yes.
and at a very young age. And so if you're a parent on here, as your kids thinking about that's so cool. What house, what floors, what exactly? Very, very specific.
Yes.
And that is, that attributes a lot of everything past that.
Yes.
And so I just thought that was like really, really cool to
Yes.
see, to see that. And then obviously took an opportunity to, come to America, come to school, went back to Tanzania, got kind of lost. And then probably I'm guessing there was a lot of parental help in there again because your mom sounds like
Yes.
an amazing human.
Yes.
And some coaching probably got you
Yes.
to think outside of being there sitting on your butt, just kind of like, I don't know
Yes.
what I want to do in life. She's like, well, figure it out. And then that's when you went to like Hurricane Katrina and we're
Yes.
like, okay, I don't know what to do here. And then you saw opportunity and built on it. Is that, I'm
Yes.
reading into the fine print here. Okay, cool.
100%. So the reason, like I assign all my success to my mom. Right? If I didn't have my mom, or if I had a different mom, I would have definitely not even come closer to where I am right now. So my mom is like a deep, deep, deep dreamer by nature, right? So she's a very visual person. She dreams. She taught us to build up alternative worlds in our minds. When we were kids, we used to read books, like all these Charles Dickens stories, Heidi, The Prince and the Pauper, and all these other books. And when my mom was telling us these stories, all these stories, like kid stories from our time, they have the same loop, which is, the story starts with a kid having a good life and then falls into a massive crisis, maybe, an orphan or whatever it is. And then, the kids, based on like, vision and dreaming and all that, pursues their way up out of that kind of situation into greatness. And so my mom, what she did since we were kids was teaching us to build that alternative world outside quote unquote reality, because reality in most times is like in direct clash with what you see, how you see yourself. So my mom taught us to build our own vision of ourselves when we were kids, and to only have the reality that we see for ourselves in our minds. And that's what we should hold. So even when my dad went bankrupt and, everything fell apart, found ourselves in a village, we went from like chartering jets and living in a house with a library and a lab, all the way to like being those kids that you see in UN pictures who are like hiding cattle. And in that position, people were laughing at us and were, that's, terrible, terrible state. But my mom, we used to go to head cattle in the wild with books. And my mom would still read us stories, right? And tells these stories and teach us how to visualize. So like what you're looking, when you open your eyes, what you're seeing isn't what you should accept. You should only have what you want in your mind, and that becomes your reality. So what happens as kids, we're very vulnerable to adapting a future based on what we're exposed to, right? So
Right.
when I was young and my dad, was doing well, my vision was to run my own company, to be like my dad, da da da, and everything was great. When we collapsed into this environment with, there's no money in circulation, none of that stuff. The only people who had like a vehicle and who were like quote unquote doing well were priests, like Catholic priests. So my vision changed from like wanting to run a company to being a Catholic priest. But luckily, I had my mom who would see that, okay, we're kind of succumbing to this external environment that we're exposed to.
Right.
So she, took us out of that environment and started, like demonstrating as a leader how you crawl yourself out of like a tight spot with the kids as a team. And then we ended up, that entire journey took me all the way to the US, which was exactly what I had in my vision, like exactly what I saw. Now, when I came from the US and crashed again, right, I was completely depressed. Like I was, I was
The highs and
destroyed.
lows.
Yes, yes. Now, the I was lucky that, I crashed so hard that I even lost belief that everything I've imagined and how I used to build my alternative future in my mind is actually delusional. It's never going to happen. Very sorry. This is it. This is reality. The only way I got out of it is I continuously saw my mom still believe that I am going to be the person I see myself. Like my mom, there's a point I crashed so hard, all my vision and all my opportunistic and optimism just disappeared. My mom was the only one that continued to believe that I'll go to university, I'll get my full scholarship, and all of that. And then then the energy shifted from me believing in myself to me saying, well, I can't disappoint my mom. If my mom is too delusional to believe that that I'm going to recover, and my mom thinks I'm this special kid who is going to do all this, I mean, maybe I am, right? So I need to go back into trying and see what's going on. So my mom took a lot of debt. Like she buried herself in debt, trying to help me, pay for, when you apply for college in the US, you pay for like those application fees, and to pay for SATs, pay for TOEFL, which is a fortune. Like her salary was like $200 a month, so paying for all this cost was massive. And my mom believed like you'll get a full scholarship, you get a full ride, you get a and so I got to a point I was like, well, I need to apply. I mean, if I don't believe in myself, at least for the sake of mom, right? And sure enough, it took me 5 years from finishing high school to get the full scholarship, everything paid for, corporate sponsorship, all years of college covered. Everything I had dreamt of when I was a kid, I got it 100%. But it took me a long time. Like the time lapse was massive getting to that point. So now in the future, so as I was improving in life, I used to tell my mom, look, now I have, money, I can build you a house in Tanzania and all that. My mom was like, no, my dream was never to have a house in Tanzania. The house I have in my mind doesn't exist in this country. I will be abroad. So I'm like, mom, I'm not that rich. Like I can't.
Better
My
keep
mom,
working.
yes, mom was like, no, no, no. Like I know you'll get there, and at that point, then I'll get on the plane and leave. And I was like, man, what is mom thinking? First of all, she has massive debts. She's working as a primary school teacher. She needs to work until retirement to pay off the debts. She needs the retirement, pension. What does she think I am, right? And sure enough, like without me knowing, without even me seeing how it's going to happen, it started Rwazi. We started getting massive corporate customers. Revenue just shot up massively. Made more money than I ever imagined. And yeah, I ended up taking my mom and my young siblings out of Tanzania, moved them out, got an apartment, gave her more like 5x what her retirement would be. Like her retirement if she finishes at 60, that amount, give her like 5x what that would be. She's living in a house that she always dreamt of. And I am looking at her and I'm saying, what she achieved her dreams. Like and the odds of her, at least I can say I went to high school in the US, I got a corporate sponsorship, I got all of that. She didn't get any of that and still got everything she dreamt of. Just by sheer will and like pure faith and just being heavily delusional, right?
Wow.
So for me, that's a massive inspiration. Well, so actually anything can actually happen. But she took risks. Like the massive mountain of debt, her bet was, well, my biggest investments are my kids. I can never work hard enough, to hit, to get on Forbes and to get on all those things and to have massive corporate customers. So I can only bet on my kids. So the direction that she had was, oh, this is the direction, this is the future I want. I can't do anything with any of my skills to get there. I have kids. The kids are smart. I've taught them well. I am their mentor. I can support them in, keeping the mind in its correct state. And those kids can be successful. And the bet is when they're successful, they can now help me get to my dreams. And that paid off. But she buried herself in debt. She did, so in the book, I talk about how she got us from the village to stage one, like what kind of business that, she had to put together. So I remember when we were like in the village at absolute, zero. And, to give you context, in that world, there's no circulation of money, right? So, yeah, like it's not that you can get a side job or anything like that. Like there's no money. People are doing subsistence farming in the backyard, so they're not actually really trading with cash. So we had an event come, that was coming in the at a school in our village, and it would bring a lot of tourists. And my mom was like, "Okay, what skills do I have?" She is an extremely good cook, right? She had a book called Food for 50, which is a very famous book, and had all sorts of recipes. And we looked at all sorts of we used to make a lot of things when, before we collapsed, and those things like cakes, all sorts of things. But in this case, like you don't have those ingredients in the immediate environment. So the most differentiated product that had the ingredients in the environment was a donut. So, but the correct donut, the correct way of making donuts, and people in that environment had never even seen the donuts, right? So we went, borrowed the ingredients from a shop, made milk tea and donuts. We used our furniture in the house to set up, like a mini fake restaurant at the road. And, early morning, people coming to the event was set up. We ended up selling everything by like 10 a.m. in the morning, right? And at a good markup because the product was new and no one knew about the product. So we paid off the shop and we started the loop. Throughout that week, we made like the most money we had ever made in that 2 years of living in the village. And we use that now to start our process of leaving that place and going on for my mom to become a teacher and so on, which I talk about in the book. And for me, the lesson there was like momentum. Momentum is the most important thing. Like when you're stuck and you're still, you're like in a stuck position, static position. The only thing you need isn't, to make millions or to have that, AI decision system idea. All you need is what kind of activities or things can you do today in the next 24 hours to generate momentum? And this could be selling the items that you have to generate cash. This could be, going to your neighbors, knocking, door by door, asking, look, I'm here, I'm useful, I have energy, I'm awake. What do you need done? And I'll be able to do that. And, we can figure out the rates and all of that stuff. At this point, you're not in a position to start, negotiating the rates and getting the best gig. And then across the days, as you get your first conversion in day one, you repeat that in day two. Now what you want is repeatability. If you sold trash, if you I don't know, if you have a car, you can do Uber, you can do DoorDash, you can clean people's carpets, you can walk dogs, you can babysit. Then you start creating cash in 24 hours. Out of those gigs, which one can you actually repeat on day two, day three, day four? Which one is draining the least amount of energy and making the highest margin, right? And then if you stack them up, which ones can you do in the same day at the same within the same 24 hours? And then as you do that, looking at your default expenditures, which default expenditures can you reduce so that you create breathing room? The thing with gigs is, if you're getting yourself from point zero, you need to do gigs, but gigs aren't there all the time and they're not the highest paying things in the world. So you want to reduce your expenditures so that you create a buffer so that the next day, if no one wants you to, wash their carpet or walk their dog, you have something to live off of the next day. So in my book, I talk about those stages in like 24 hours. What do you do in 24 hours? What do you do in 7 hours? What do you do throughout a month, throughout a year, and then 10 years, building a, business and then turning that into a business with systems and so on and building wealth, right? And wealth for me, I'm not talking about, IPOing your company for $1 billion. No, that's not for everyone. And by the way, that's, from my experience, it's not necessarily like the most valuable thing, right? So what I'm talking about is the future and the life you envision for yourself, which is the most important piece. how do you go through day one, day 7, 30, 1 year, 10 years, to go from zero to the future that you're visioning for yourself, the life you're visioning for yourself. That could be you own a small business and the business is doing well, you paid off your house, your kids are going to college, they don't have student debt, whatever it is, right? So that future, how do you materialize it practically? And what I've learned through time is, yes, it's good to talk about mindset and positive thinking and all that stuff, but it's not easy for most people, by the way. Like, it's not easy. I can correctly build my, mental future, like, my future self in my mind. But that's a skill that, because I, grew up like that, my mom told me that since I was a kid, not everyone has that. And in the book, I've designed the processes such that you don't need to do a lot of, mental shifting, changing your belief systems, and so on. You can be, honestly, you can be a negative person and still get from day one to day two, right? And eventually, as you apply these steps and you put them into motion, your mind is like the biggest, bigger than AI. Like, we talk about AI, but I can get into that. But the mind is the biggest, dynamic machine, learning machine that you ever see. Just without you, being conscious of it, your mind is going to change its way of perceiving the world, its way of working, just as you take actions. So if you're always early, right? If you always show up early, if you're very good to work with, because that's what you need in the beginning, right? Those are the very valuable things that will get you more business. If you're very easy to work with, you always show up early, you always do what you say you're going to do, you always over deliver, you always take initiative, you always do more with less. If you apply those things over time, your mind is just going to adjust and you'll see yourself becoming a different person, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years down the line. So we will break down a lot of those things. As now we're saying, the larger economy is difficult for most people. I'm in the data world, and we see like a lot of things are very, very expensive. Like, people's salaries have remained the same. So we haven't seen a lot of changes on that front. And the cost of living and everything else is going up. So how do you cope in that kind of environment and build the future you see for yourself?
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. So you got to a point where you were working really hard and there wasn't a lot of results. And that's when you wrote the book, I believe. Your second book, from what I gather, Never Stay Broke. Tell us a little bit about what that feeling was, and then what is the book about and how can it help people?
Yeah. So I wrote Never Stay Broke actually like this year. And I wrote it out of a reflection. I was reflecting for the last 2 years on uh, like, how did I get to this position? And the people that I give advice and that have helped, starting with my siblings, to my friends, and so on. What are the what are the common things that I advise them on, and how do they go about executing to actually see their dreams come to life? So I have a lot of stories around that. And that got me to think, like, look, so many people are in very tight positions, the same way I was in those positions throughout my experience. And this is a book I wish I had. Now, I read, The Secret. I read Think and Grow Rich, which is my favorite book, number one. But books like Think and Grow Rich, they require you to actually, actively change your way of perceiving the world. And it's underestimated, but that's like a very, very hard thing for most people to do. It's very hard for you to do if you're in a corner, like as of right now, right? So that's why in July I was like, okay, let me just yeah, I had inspiration. I had thought about it for 2 years, but I didn't know exactly what to write, how to go about it. So in July, I was like, yes, now that I just got inspiration. I was sitting 16 hours on my weekends, spending writing the book. And this is the book. Now, the book Never Stay Broke breaks down, forget about motivation, forget about inspiration and all that stuff. It's good, but put them aside. Let's look at the practical steps you can take. Like, if you follow like a manual, imagine you're following like an IKEA manual, putting together like a shelf or something. If you follow these steps exactly as they are, step by step, in 24 hours, to convert, from negative to like $0, don't know what to eat if you're in that position, or a lot of people have, went to university, did software engineering. Now AI is taking their jobs, so they're stuck at home. How do you go from that position, right, to the next 24 hours? You have a breathing room, like you have space because you've made $50, $100, whatever it is. And then how do you then create repeatability from what happened in the last 24 hours that you applied to generate $100? How do you create that repeatability throughout the 7 days? By, stacking your gates, looping your income, and so on. So talk about that in the book. And then how do you create systems, like initial systems like QuickBooks, having email, a calendar for scheduling, and so on. Automated systems behind your work to enable you to stack multiple gigs based on your margin, and based on where you want to spend your energy. So the least energy consumers, right? And then how do you go from that process to having people to help you out? How do you assess what kind of gig or service to offer, to the market, and so on? So the book just starts from, extreme point of desperation all the way expanding as you're getting more breathing room, expanding to, now how do you get to a point where you have a, repeatable salary? How do you get to a point where you can support other people? How do you get to a point where, you eventually have savings, and so on? So throughout that entire loop. It's the biggest theme across the board is there's a work done framework that I talk about in the book. In physics, when I was in high school, got introduced to the concept of work done. So, and the concept was, so work is said, it's a physics concept. It's like work is said to be done if a force of 1 Newton moves a mass of 1 kilogram through a distance of 1 meter in the direction of the force. The most important thing there was the word "in the direction of the force." So in physics, if you push as hard as you can, a big box or a fridge, and it doesn't move an inch, you actually haven't done anything. Even if you sweat and you go hungry or you break your leg, like, you haven't done anything. If you push that fridge, as hard as you possibly can, and instead of, moving forwards, it moves left or right or in any other direction, other than the direction, through which you're pushing, it doesn't count. It's like zero. Like you didn't do anything. And my aha moment in that concept was, oh, when I was spending too much energy when I was trying to like get out. I was like, have you seen have you seen like when you're stuck, when you have like wires and you're trying to do everything, just get yourself out. I was doing all sorts of things when I was younger, try to, find my stream. And I would find myself spending hours and hours on end, getting really tired. Then you look at my bank balance, nothing has really changed because I wasn't channeling all that energy on one thing, which in this case, the mass that you want to push is your life, and the direction is your vision of yourself. Like, what vision do you have of yourself? And are you spending your energy moving your life in the direction of that vision, right? And when I understood that, I'm like, okay, what thing every day I need to look at the things I'm spending my energy on today. Are they the things that are getting me to the vision I have for myself or my future? So, like, hence, can't club because clubbing is not gonna, contribute to that push towards that vision. Can't spend on certain things because they're not going to help me build my, if you're building savings for investment and all that, so it doesn't contribute to that. Can't, so certain life decisions, certain, small decisions, can't you end up filtering them out naturally because if you have daily awareness of the vision you have of yourself. In my case was, well, you have to live in LA, you have a nice family, you have to retire your mother, you're there. So is everything I'm doing, is it taking me there? So when I finished undergrad, I had a job offer, great job offer. It was like 10K a month out of school, great, with a car and all that. It was like great, but I rejected it because like, well, 10K a month, if I extrapolate, will I ever have enough money to retire my mom, get her a house, and do all these things I want to do? No. So I can't take, no matter how big 10K a month looks like, I just can't take it because if I extrapolate into the future, it's not gonna get me to the vision I have of myself. So I ended up, going into consulting and eventually starting my startup. So as the readers are getting into the first 24-hour loop, 7-day loop, every action, every gig you pick, and every, loop that you're building 7 days a month, and so on. You have to have built this vision that you have of yourself, and everyone has it. Like,
Yeah.
people have this misconception that they don't have the vision. Everyone, I'm telling you, everyone knows how they're looking at themselves, and this is what the book is anchored on.
Awesome. Guys, get the book. In wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions, and then anything we didn't touch on that would be really impactful for our listeners. First and final question is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
Be quiet, stay with yourself, with no noise, like no electronics, nothing. Just be quiet, no humans around you. Just be quiet for long enough. An hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, a whole day. By the end of that day, you'll have that vision of yourself. For me, the
Awesome.
purpose, yeah, the purpose can, once you have a vision of yourself, then you'll know what your purpose is, because that's the journey to that vision, right?
Cool. Second question, what's one quote that you really like, one of your favorite quotes, and why?
Okay, so this comes from the Bible. Ask and you shall receive, because whoever asks receives, which is fascinating. Whoever asks receives. And the
Cool.
statement is like always, every time, all the time.
Third and final question, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Dreamer.
Awesome. Running into someone in a coffee shop, and they're learning how to dream, learning how to visualize, or helping their kids do that, or whatever. We've chatted about already. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think if like I think the biggest thing, we've touched all the highlights, and I believe, everyone has a vision of themselves. I believe that, everyone can get to their vision, you know. The vision isn't shared and isn't equal. And people are going to be happy by achieving whatever that vision looks like for them. So this is not a competition. This is not saying, well, the whole world can't be, can't be rich or anything. It's not about that. It's about what is that vision. Could be, I've known people who have had visions just to be taxi drivers. People have had visions just to be whatever it is, and everyone can get it. And there's enough resources in you. There's enough resources in the world to get you to that vision that you have of yourself. That's why you have it. So I want people to take that away.
I love that. Guys, I'm sure you want to, get the book, definitely, or learn more about what Joseph does for businesses and stuff. All of that stuff will be in the show notes. So make sure to check that out. Dream, have a vision, and don't let little things get in the way. I thought that was so interesting. A $10,000 a month job for a lot of people would be pretty good, but he gave that up to work for $0 a month to build something that he saw would get bigger than that. So that's pretty cool. Let's go out there, guys. If we can help one person or one starfish at a time, together we can help change the world. Thanks for being on, Joseph.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.